So the first thing we're going to talk about is what is a digital backdrop, which probably to start, we have to talk about what a backdrop is in theater and history.
Right.
I mean, typically they've always been a piece of cloth. You know, whether it's ballet or dance or theater, it's a piece of cloth that you traditionally hang using a fly system. It's painted to reflect trees or a castle or all kinds of different scenes. But in this new age of everything digital, now a digital backdrop is an image that you produce on a small scale. It could be a watercolor painting, it could be a drawing, it could be a photograph, or it could be illustrated, but it's traditionally something that now you have on a computer and you basically transmit a signal to the projector, to a projector, and then project onto some sort of a surface, like it could be a wall, it could be a cyclorama, it could be a piece of fabric, it could be all sorts of different things. So,
yeah, they've done a lot of different things over the years, right? Think about movies. They've always innovated in that space to try different ways of creating.
Yeah, projection itself is one of the oldest things, actually. That's what's so interesting about it. It's you know, as far back as where they could figure out, hey, if we shine a light through something, we could create some sort of a shadow or an image or something on the space. But I think projections or digital backdrops has really become more popular lately, and you're seeing it more just because, especially in educational theater or in community theater and dance, now almost anybody can have a laptop and some sort of a projector, although we can definitely talk about that, to use, so then it just kind of levels the playing field so that people can start using that, you know, in their shows.
Right. It's become a lot more reachable.
Yeah. One point to make too is that the language is changing a little bit too, because now that we would call them projections because it was always a projector. And I guess it's a point, when this started in theater, you know, it wasn't always a backdrop replacement. It was sometimes like a small piece of video that you were just shining into maybe one part of your space. It could be through a window. It could just be to show a picture. It could be like a little body of water. But now it's kind of, you know, a lot of people are filling an entire psych with it, and they're using it as the backdrop. If they're doing Wizard of Oz, they can cover all of the different scenes by doing that. But one thing is that now that LED screens are in, the language is moving a little bit away from just projections, and it's moving over to digital scenery, because, you know, people are using LED screens, directors are using projectors still, and projectors will still be around, and people will be using them for a long time. So
more ways to accomplish the same thing as technology evolves.
Yeah. One thing I will say about a digital backdrop is that there are all kinds of different artistic looks and formats that you can use. It could be as simple as taking a photograph and using that. It could be a collage, so you can collage together photographs or imagery. It could just be used as a sophisticated light, where maybe you do hint at some different graphic shapes or different colors and things like that. It doesn't have to be a full-on, hand-painted, fully rendered scene like it was in the days of painting on fabric. You know, some ways you can use it. What are some other things that come to mind?
Like in using projections?
Yeah, just to different types of imagery or different styles that you could use.
Yeah, I mean, one thing we've seen people do, like if you have a projector, is you can use it for multiple things, especially if it's a front projector, right? They might, but during a scene change, they might show something I've seen video playback, or even transitions. Like if there's a travel happening, I've seen shows where they'll play a montage on the curtain or on a drop-down screen during a set change. Just brings a whole new flexibility to ways to keep the audience engaged. Instead of just a blackout, you know, you can do things like that. Maybe before the show, there might be a slideshow, or there might be just the title of the show. There's different ways people can take advantage, you know, of having a giant screen.
And the fact that you can introduce animation into it too.
Right.
Even if you're doing something as simple as a show curtain, you can have that logo move. Or if you're doing the Nutcracker, you can have the logo move, but snow is coming down, and that's built on a loop. You can add lots of different kinds of effects. Fire, rain, explosions.
Right.
Obviously, theaters have certain restrictions when it comes to using open flame. And so to be able to project that in some way can help alleviate that, or maybe just help to do an effect that you wouldn't even have a way of doing.
There's some things that you just can't practically do, you know, in practical effects, you know, large open flames, fireworks, explosions, you know, mushroom clouds. But you can do that easily with a projection. So.
And maybe Broadway has the budget. But a smaller theater now has a way to do that. And so I think for directors, it can be pretty exciting because it just gives them another creative tool set to be able to come up with ideas, to be able to integrate new things into their shows, to have their students create things that they can put into the show that are kind of in line with a lot of modern media that we have anyways. I mean, I've been talking about this with different folks lately, but we are much more used to, for better or worse in our society, of having screens around. That's sort of, in a certain way, made our tastes a little more savvy. We're kind of used to pretty advanced, pretty sophisticated visual effects. So to have that ability to put that into a high school show or a middle school show, I think for a lot of directors is pretty exciting.
The other thing that occurred to me is I've actually seen, like, you know, in movie theaters now, they do like little ad rolls at the beginning. You could actually even use that as a marketing thing. People put them in like a printed brochure to try and fundraise for your show, but you could also present, you know, on a projector before the show.
But yeah, and another thing that you can do with the digital backdrop is you can map not only onto a flat surface, which is behind your actors. I mean, that would be a traditional backdrop or digital backdrop, but you also can now project on the floor. You can project waves. You can project onto fog, which gives like a really cool volumetric feel. In fact, when I was working on a production of The Christmas Carol, they had this whole system rigged up to be able to project snow falling onto fog, which gave it this really interesting kind of volumetric look, which just, it gives it kind of a 3D quality. So there's that. There's, you can project onto costumes. You can project onto dresses. I mean, if you watch America's Got Talent, I mean, they're doing all kinds of things with projection. And the great thing is, you really don't have to have a ton of gear to be able to do some of these things, even at the, I don't want to say the lower levels, but just all different levels of theater. I mean, we do a lot of work for middle schools and elementary schools, and they're starting to incorporate that in. In fact, one thing I was thinking about is you can create a whole experience, kind of like if you think about a theme park, they're thinking about the whole experience. So for example, there was one elementary school I was working with, they didn't actually use projection or digital backdrops in their show, but they wanted Seussical style jungle imagery that was projected down the hallway as people were walking in to start to immerse them in that world and give them a taste of what was coming. So it's one of the cool things is you can really think outside the bounds of just what you're doing traditionally behind the actors, and you can kind of paint a whole canvas because you can literally project onto anything.
Yeah. Start creating experiences instead of just a stage, you know, and a curtain and a background. You know?
And there's better and better tools to be able to projection map onto different kinds of surfaces. I mean, there's even sets I've seen. Now, this is at some of the highest levels where they'll build an entire set in 3D and then map an image of part of a room on one side, part of a room on the back, part of a room on the other side. And then the doors can be interactive. Even though people are not necessarily passing through the projection part of it, they're having different parts of it, you know, interacting. So it just kind of opens up the possibilities.
And on the other end of the spectrum of like the highest levels and complexity, we've seen people simplify their sets, where they might have little pieces that are very light that they can move in and out quickly because they don't need to have a massive wall in the background. They can project that and then set changes, take less people and less time because they're just rolling in and out, small things. Or even like we've seen people bring in small stands and they flip them around. They might have 2 or 3 sides. And so one set piece can become 2 or 3 different scenes with a projection, and keep it simple.
Yeah. In fact, it was making me think of, I got a call from a director in California, and I mention this because this is my favorite use of the technology, is when it's not seen always as a set replacement, but it's something that can work in combination with set. But she was doing a production of Puffs, which is, kind of Harry Potter, but done in a fun way. And she told me, hey, I'm going to build an entire set. So I'm going to build, from end to end, from stage right to stage left, I'm going to have an entire set. I'm going to build in picture frames, a fireplace, a mantle, all of these different, 3D elements on the set. But then I'm going to paint everything with a light gray, and we're going to create projected imagery that maps on top of that, which is really cool.
If you want living photographs, or you want some of those little touches,
Yeah, or even to use it in an abstract way where you're not necessarily trying to line up a mantle to a mantle or a picture to a picture, but you're using colors, you're using shapes, you're just, your imagination can run wild with it.
Yeah, that reminds me, one of our friends who's a director, I used to always work very hard not to have any spill onto the scene or onto the actors or any of that. It was always one of the challenges of front projection. And she kind of opened my eyes, because she's like, I love it because it kind of brings things together, and the color that's in the background is now on the scene, on the stage, on the actors. And so just thinking outside of the box, sometimes something that out of the gate seems negative or bad can actually end up creating a neat effect. Instead of trying to fight it, you actually can work with it.
Yeah, I love that. In fact, I know what production you're talking about. It was Joseph in the amazing Technicolor Dreamcoat. And I remember we had done some imagery that was a little bit more textural and more abstract, like when Joseph was in prison, for example. So you got this blue light with the prison bars. And I remember she told me, I'm so glad that I've got some spill onto the actors, because it feels like it's actually integrating them in with the scene more. And then she said, I just use the lights to counterbalance that out when I don't want as much spill. So at the time she was working with a limitation, because the projector was all the way in the back of the house. So there really was no way to keep the image off the actors.
And we didn't have like RGB computer controlled overhead lighting in that facility. So there wasn't a way for us to paint blue on the actors, So we just were able to use what we had.
I mean, what year was that?
Oh, that might have been like 2008 or something, 2009.
Yeah. And it's come so far since then, just the technology to be able to do it.
Yeah.
It's way more affordable, and just, a lot of schools have access to it.
I mean, that was a 70-pound projector sitting in the balcony, projecting all the way across the theater. And
probably pretty loud and pretty hot.
Yeah, I sat next to it for a couple of hours every night. It was very warm.
Yeah.